fitting closing plenary session to the symposium, which I'm happy to say, you know, I think this is not going to be a one-time thing. We're planning on, we really want to keep bringing all of us together, you know, at least annually, hopefully. So thanks for being part of this first iteration of the symposium, though. We really do appreciate it. It doesn't happen without all of you. I think it's fitting also to close the symposium with leadership from our own Project Rebound programs in the CSU. And so I'm really excited that we're closing on this note too. I'm gonna leave the introduction of the session and our speakers to an all-star on our campus, Tiffany James, who works with CSU Project Rebound here on our campus. Also was kind enough to share her story as part of our Humanities Beyond Bars initiative, our oral history program that speaks with formerly incarcerated students and staff about their life experiences, their resilience, challenges, and successes. So Tiffany, thanks so much for sharing this session and for all you do. Really, really appreciate it, and welcome up. Let's give Tiffany a round of applause.
Hi everyone, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here. I wanna thank our guests, our leaders of Project Rebound that are stepping up with us today. I'll start by introducing them. We have Lily Gonzalez. Lily? Okay, so Lily Gonzalez is a program coordinator for Project Rebound at California State University, Northridge. So a CSUN support program for formerly incarcerated individuals, or students I should say. She is a co-founder of the Revolutionary Scholars, a student organized grounded in prison of abolition and supporting formerly incarcerated individuals and system impacted students. Lily has been awarded the Just Leadership USA 2017 Leading with Conviction Fellowship, Rockwood Leadership Institution 2018 Returning Citizens Fellowship, and the CSUN 2018 Newman Civic Fellowship. She graduated from CSUN in 2017 with her BA in Chicano Studies and is currently completing her master's in arts in Chicano Studies. So everybody give a warm welcome from Lily. And we also have Priscilla Terriquez, thank you. Priscilla has earned her Bachelor in Arts and Liberal Studies with a minor in sociology and is currently pursuing her master's in social and cultural analysis of education at CSU Long Beach. She is the program coordinator for Project Rebound at Cal Poly Pomona, and she is also the coordinator for the collaboration between Project Rebound and the Department of Juvenile Justice, where mentors from Project Rebound across the state are selected and placed in different facilities to mentor their youth. So, everybody welcome Priscilla. Lastly but not least, we have Irene Sotelo. Irene, everybody, wave at them. Irene graduated with her master's in social work in spring 2021, and as an undergraduate student, she helped co-found Rising Scholars. It's an on-campus student organization that supports formerly incarcerated and system-impacted students. Using both of her lived experience and the knowledge she has gained in academia, Irene has discovered her calling to empower those who feel marginalized in a society to pursue their higher education. Through her commitment and passion over the last 5 years, she has been instrumental to bringing Project Rebound to California State University, Long Beach. Irene was hired as the program coordinator for Project Rebound and within a year, in 2021, was promoted to assistant director. So let's give it up for our 3 leaders here from Project Rebound. Thank you.
Thank you everyone so much for hanging out with us on a hot Friday afternoon. We appreciate it. I'm just gonna start off by giving everyone an overview of women's incarceration. So what are the numbers? What does it look like, right? What are some of the barriers and some of the systemic issues? So we're just gonna touch on that before getting into a little bit of our personal stories and what brings us and moves us to do this work. So let's start off by incarceration rates, right? So what does that look like? We have in the US, 5% of the world's women's population, right, lives here. But we have nearly 30% of the world's incarcerated women. Women's incarceration has grown at a rate of 834% in the last 40 years, and 60% of incarcerated women are in county jails and have not been convicted. 80% of those women are mothers, like many of us here on this stage with you today. So what are the most common charges that women are going to jail for in LA County? And this is data that I pulled from Million Dollar Hoods, which is a great database and search engine. And there's a report, right, that they put out. And if you look at the charge categories, we see that these are crimes of poverty, right? It's not really what we would deem like unlawful behavior, I guess. So these are the common charges that we're seeing women go to jail for in our respective county. And if we want to break down those numbers, right, what does it look like in my neighborhood specifically? And the reason I chose the east side of South Central is because I knew that E was going to be here last night, and we're both from the same neighborhood. We're both from the same community. And in doing this work, one thing that I found is that there was many people that came from the same neighborhood I did. And if you see the high amount of, the large number that we spend, right? And in 2021, the County of LA, the Sheriff's Department budget, which operates the largest jail system, had a total budget of $3.3 billion with 862 million, or 26% of their budget, that is spent on their jail system. So we're putting a lot of money into this, right? So when women are incarcerated, right, like as I mentioned, 60% of women in prison are mothers. 80% of women in jail prior to conviction, right, are mothers. And a lot of the women that are incarcerated are also survivors of sexual assault. And I'm not sure if you all have been listening to what's been happening in the news, but there was also a really large payout if you were incarcerated in LA County. And the way that the eligibility requirements for that, right? It's like, it depends on the weather, it depends on the condition, it depends on the time of day. So this was all because, to eliminate or decrease the number of women that were eligible for this. I personally was eligible for, I had 36 strip searches that were eligible for this, right? Also because of the power dynamics that exist behind bars, we see so much abuse from the guards to the women, right? And when you're incarcerated, we know that we don't have consent or control over our bodies. And I'm not sure if you all are familiar with the film Belly of the Beast, but I encourage you all to watch it. At Valley State Prison, where I was incarcerated in 2011, we had a doctor that was performing illegal hysterectomies to women, right? And one of the things that he said, the doctor specifically said that money spent on sterilizing inmates was minimal compared to what you save in welfare paying for those unwanted children as they procreated more. And also pregnancy in US jails, there's so many women that are giving birth in shackles. So what are some of those barriers, right, when you come home? Everything. Everything becomes that much more difficult to navigate. Some of those things, right, is housing. Housing that supports you and your reentry with your child, right? Employment. When you're looking for work, what is that work gonna look like? So there's actually a report that's called Out of Prison and Out of Work. It's put out by Prison Policy Initiative. And their analysis shows that formerly incarcerated people are unemployed at a rate of over 27%, which is larger than the Great Depression, but we're not talking about it the same, right? And when women that are previously incarcerated find work, it's usually part-time work and not full-time work. And those are what those numbers, unemployment. If you're a Black woman and you're unemployed, your unemployment rate is 43%. Versus their white, formerly incarcerated counterparts, which are 18.4. Along with that, accessing food for your children when you first come home. A lot of this is done through CalFresh, SNAP benefits, right? And in San Diego, they found a report that these random home inspections for women that were trying to access these resources to feed their kids were not actually random, that they were very much linked to their criminal or conviction history. And so the ACLU in San Diego got involved, right? And restoring our relationships with our families, with our children, because we've been separated by the carceral system. And I often think about, how my mother and her mother were separated by borders and the trauma that caused her. And I think about how my daughter and I have been separated by my own incarceration, right? And when we look at, I'm just gonna close with this, when we look at the definition of genocide, I'm gonna focus on the last two in bold, but it says, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So we see that with our foster care system, right, and our state system. And not many people are able to tell stories of reunification with their children, but for some of us, we've been lucky that we've been able to. And with that, I'm gonna transition it out to Priscilla.
Thank you, Lily. So hi, everyone. So as Lily was mentioning, right, these are all statistics. It's data, it's information. Once you've been processed, that's it, you become that number. You're given a number once you go inside, and when you come out and people collect information, you stay that number. You stay that statistic. So for those who were here yesterday, listening to the folks who run the podcast Ear Hustle, they talked about changing the narrative, right? Giving insight and that humanistic perspective of those who are humans and are incarcerated, while the people on the outside don't see them that way. And this is why we're gonna share a little bit about our story. So, mind you, I am a crier, so if you need to get tissues, if you're an empath, please, by all means.
Do you have tissue?
I have a tissue, right here, right here. I came prepared. So a little bit about myself, right? I'm just gonna give you like bullet points, but really deep bullet points. So I ended up closing my first case, right, in October 2012. I was in a very abusive relationship, it started already, okay. So I was in a very abusive relationship, both physically, mentally, and emotionally. It was just a very toxic relationship. And I ended up doing, harm to this person. And I'm the type of person, if I do something wrong, I'm gonna own up to it. I'm not gonna say, I didn't do it, when obviously I did. But I ended up closing the case in October and ended up pregnant by this person. A couple months later, this person ended up accusing me of something that I didn't do. But because there were such close in range from October 2012 to December 2012, I ended up getting convicted of a crime that I didn't do. Even though I had enough evidence, I had everything saying that I was nowhere near this person, unfortunately, the DA didn't believe me, because the DA did, what they do best, they scare you. They scare you saying like, hey, Priscilla, if you take it to trial, you're gonna face up to 12 years. But if you sign and plead guilty, you're gonna get 2 years with half time. At the time that this was going on, the day that I was arrested, was the day I found out I was having a boy. So I was 5 months pregnant, So I was 5 months pregnant at the time. Ooh. Just one quick second. Okay, regroup. So I was 5 months pregnant at the time, and that's not news, obviously, that a pregnant woman wants to hear that. You got two options, 2 years of your son's life or 12. And, I put my son forward. I was like, you know what, I'd rather miss 2 years of his time than 12 years, because obviously you want to be in your son's life, you want to be in your child's life. And so, sorry, I'm trying to get it together. And that's what happened, right? Ended up being sentenced to something I didn't do. Fast forward, the lack of medical attention that's within the facilities for pregnant people is horrendous. I can count on one hand how many times I actually went to the hospital for prenatal visits and everything that they're supposed to do. And if you're a mom, if you know someone who's a mom, you're supposed to go towards the last trimester, you're going at least twice a month. So for me to go in just 4 times. And I want to say 3 of those times was with a midwife within the facility. And all they did was check my weight and the heartbeat. And that was pretty much it. So there was no ultrasounds, no nothing. I did end up going to the hospital once for actual blood work. And then the following time that I went to the hospital was because of the negligence of the facility. I ended up getting a really bad kidney infection when I was 7 to 8 months pregnant. I was throwing up all day. You know, I couldn't keep anything down, no liquids. I felt really, really weak. And my bunkie at the time, she was so aggravated at the fact that they weren't giving me that attention that she went to the CO and had an altercation with the CO because she wanted me to get attention. But yet they didn't do that. All they did was arrest her, stick her in the hole for a week, and that was their way of, you know, taking care of the defiance of this person. I mustered the courage to be able to go to the phone. I called my dad, and it would just so happen my dad was outside the facility, you know, coming to visit me since we lived probably within like 20 minutes away. They were outside, and I told him what was going on. I was like, hey, I need to go to the hospital, but they don't want to take me. And he said, okay, call me back in 5 minutes. And as I'm waiting by the phone, there was a little intercom, and the CO inside the unit said, Terriquez, your family's here to visit you. Do you want to take the visit, or do you want to go to the hospital? And to me, at that point in time, I saw that as the stupidest question that you can ask someone. I was like, I want to go to the hospital. And it's like, okay, grab your things. Grab my stuff, and I go to the hospital. I ended up being hospitalized for a little bit over a week, and that was my other prenatal visit, because while I was there, they did the rest of the, you know, blood work that they were supposed to do. They did ultrasounds to make sure that everything went well, that my baby wasn't affected with the kidney infection and all the medical, you know, medicine that they were giving me. So that was the 5th, you know, prenatal visit that I got. Soon after that, you know, I found out later that the only reason that they took me to the hospital was because my dad threatened the CO at the visiting station, telling them that if they don't take me, he's gonna sue the county for negligence. So apparently that worked for them to take me, but you know, me throwing up and telling them, pleading them, you know, that I needed to go to the hospital didn't. Fast forward, and it's the day of me going into labor. I was in denial pretty much the whole day. My labor pains probably started around lunchtime and got worse during dinner time. All the moms that I was sitting with, they were all moms of like 2, 3, 4 kids, and they would tell me, they're like, hey, you're in labor, and I'm like, you don't know. You don't know anything. You don't know if I'm in labor. I think I would know if I'm in labor. But of course I wouldn't, because obviously it's my first child, and you know, I don't know what labor feels like. So I just brush it off, and I go back to the cell, right? I go back to the cell, and my bunkie there tells me, she's like, hey, you need to push that button. But if you've ever been, you know, in a facility, they tell you if you push that button and it's not an emergency, you're gonna get thrown in the hole. So that was my other fear. Like, I don't wanna push that button for what? Because what if I don't give birth? Then they're gonna throw me in the hole, and I don't wanna be in the hole. But peer pressure is real amongst adults. So my bunkie told me, if you don't push that button, I'm gonna push it for you. Your contractions are less than 2 minutes apart, and you're gonna have your child here if you don't leave. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe she's right. Maybe she has some sense. So I ended up pushing the button, and I tell them that I'm in labor, my contractions are less than 2 minutes apart. And sure enough, they took me, they rushed me to the hospital. They took me to Arrowhead Hospital in Colton, California. I come to find out later that that was a teaching hospital. So while I was there, I get accepted by the nurses. You know, they do all the blood work that they're supposed to do, make sure I was able to get the epidural still and all this other stuff. As soon as I got my room assigned, I had 2 babysitters, one inside and then one by the door, because apparently I can't have any visitors either since I'm still currently incarcerated. As soon as I lay in bed, they shackle me to the bed to make sure that I don't leave. The OBGYN at the time, she's like, why do you have to shackle her? It's like, oh, she's a flight risk. And in my head, I'm like, how am I a flight risk? There's a person that's gonna be coming out of me. What am I gonna do, like waddle down the hall with another person coming out? I didn't understand the logic that they had. I didn't understand that. And, you know, I didn't want to argue with them because obviously they were going to get their way anyways. So I, you know, stayed shackled. They gave me the epidural, everything was fine. And later on, the OBGYN came in, the doctor that was going to help deliver my baby. And she came in with 6 to 7 other students. My legs at the time were in stirrups. Sorry. They were in stirrups, the little metal things. And the OBGYN goes in, she does what she's supposed to check, make sure everything's going the way it's supposed to. And then she turns back and she looks at all her students and says, okay, each one of you is gonna go in and check, and I'm gonna walk you through the process. Like, I understand, right, that it's a teaching hospital. Sorry, I'll get it together. I understand it's a teaching hospital, right? And at that point, I didn't think I had rights to tell them no, because the system tells you that you have no rights. Me being myself, I believed that I had no rights whatsoever. And that was the most humiliating experience I've ever gone through, right? And it was because after each time the student went in, they patted my leg and said, thank you. And I'm like, are you being, excuse my language, are you being fucking serious? Like, I can't do anything. Why are you saying thank you to me? Like, you literally just felt me up, and, you know, it sucked. It was a horrible experience. And, sorry. So yeah, I'm just gonna cut forward. My son was born a couple hours after. He was born a healthy baby boy, 8 pounds solid. That kid just shot out of there. It was a lot to push out, but he knew it was time. So he was a healthy baby boy, and I was fortunate enough to be able to have my family's support, right? Because a lot of folks who give birth in prison, they don't have that. They don't have the support system, and I did. And I was lucky enough that, you know, they lived 20 minutes away. And so I was with my son for 2 days, and then I had to give him up. But I knew I was giving him up into a loving home where people are gonna welcome him and, you know, love him to the fullest. And he's still spoiled, not by me, but by grandparents, because, you know, that's their only grandchild. And for him to be processed, you know, go through the things that he went through, even before he was born, it's just, I'm really happy that he's not traumatized, that none of that passed through to him. Fast forward, yeah, it's the day of my parole release, right? I'm going home, getting my $200 because that's helpful in this economy. You know, I'm gonna be able to rent a room with $200. And there was no resources for me. And that's the thing that sucked the most, right? There was no resources. The only resource I had was my parole agent's number and their address, and I didn't really want that. I wanted resources on how to be a mom, because I didn't know how. You know, I wasn't with my son until later on in his life. And there was nothing. So I get home, and that was a difficult part. No one teaches you how to reunify with your children. I would come home and it sucked because my mom would be like, hey, your son's over there. I'm like, okay, let me go grab him. He would run away from me screaming. I'd pick him up, he'd cry. It's just a horrible, horrible start off to the relationship that we try to develop. And it was a struggle, to say the least. It was hard to be able to build that connection with your child when no one taught you how. You know, I took him with me to school. I was working full-time and going to school full-time, and I had him in the daycare for 12 hours a day because, you know, there was no one to help. In doing that, I didn't find any programs on campus that would help me, that would teach me how to be a good mom, that would teach me how to build that relationship that was disconnected from the beginning. Transferred over to Cal Poly Pomona, there was nothing. It wasn't until later on where I found out about Project Rebound. At this point, my son was like 4 or 5 years old. And I found out about them, and connecting with the people there was the only support and resource I had, because there was parents within that program that went through the same thing, whether it was, giving birth in prison or as soon as they got out, or being separated from their children. They had to go through that process of how to rebuild that trust that was broken. So, little to say, I'm really happy that there's all these resources and programs within higher education now at the community college, all the way up to the UC, CSUs. And that would have really been helpful, during my time. It would have been really helpful, but I'm glad that it happened when it happened, that I talked to the people that I talked to, because even though they weren't in similar situations, they experienced that separation, and they helped guide me how to be able to build that relationship with my son. And I won't take up any more of your time, because I don't know if I can. So I'm gonna pass it over to Lily.
Yeah. So, when I was first arrested, I never thought I was going to come home. I was facing so much time. You start to compartmentalize things and detach, right? And so I'm thinking I'm never going to come home. Because of that, I think I was able to just kind of accept, these are the things that are normal in here, like the strip searches, like the way that we're treated, right? It was so normalized to me. So for me, when I was going through processing and stuff, prior to my arrest, I was diagnosed with gestational trophoblastic cancer, which is a really rare form of cancer that happens in the lining of the uterus to women, right? And I'm going through medical and stuff, and the doctor that's processing me through is like, wow, this is such a rare form of cancer. Like, has your doctor written about it? This is like a feather in their cap. And I'm like, no, my doctor actually cares about my wellness. Well, I didn't know what was gonna happen, right? What that triggered was, in the system, it shows this. So now all of a sudden I'm up for these random visits to go to the LA County Hospital. And I can't refuse them, I can't deny them, I have to deny them what they say in person. So what this looks like for me is, for one, every time you leave the facility and you return, you're strip searched, right? I can't deny this visit, right? So what happens to me, I'm extracted out of my cell, and then every time that I go. This just to show, right, the lack of consent over our bodies. Eventually, the reason I was able to come home, I should say, is because I had the privilege of having my family provide a paid attorney for me. And not that all paid attorneys, it's not an advertisement, but I'm really happy. My attorney was the best. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be up here. But at the same time, right, all these things were so normalized, and now it's well, there's a lawsuit happening, there's this happening, right? And during my incarceration, I was in solitary confinement. And I wasn't able to touch my daughter. I wasn't able to see my daughter. Everything was behind a glass, and for 30 minutes. And phone calls were so expensive, there was no way that I was gonna be able to talk to her on the phone regularly. So, that's something that her and I are still working on, is our relationship, right? But there was so much, I don't know how to pronounce this word, depravity. I don't know. Never mind. Everything was so scarce. There was nothing in there, okay? I had nothing coming to me when I was in there. Let me just say. So, how I stayed connected to my daughter in this setting was through correspondence. Correspondence became so meaningful to us, and I'm gonna share one story about that. And during the time that I was being transitioned from CRDF, which is the women's jail, to Valley State Prison for Women, which is now closed, this happened during my daughter's birthday. So for context, I was arrested 2 days after my daughter's 8th birthday. And I just recently found out that she has feelings about that, and she connects her birthday to like this negative thing. So when I first got, when I was first arrested, I struggled to like initially reach out to her, and then from then I wrote to her every single day or every single week with whatever resources I had, right? And I was really worried about being able to stay in connection with her while I was in reception, because you know that you don't have really anything there. So, they say that people in solitary confinement are violent, they're this, there's that. There's so much like bullshit behind why you get classified to even be in there, right? So the women that I was incarcerated with collected cards and letters for my daughter for her birthday and mailed them to her so that she can have something for her from her mom, because I was probably not going to be able to. And that was when, the importance of community, right? And how we're in this like really horrible place, but we're surviving together. And we're on 23-hour lockdown, but the person in the cell next to you makes sure like, hey, what do you need while I'm out, And one of those, we were locked down for, I'm gonna share this story real quick. We were locked down for 3 days. I had already not come out of my cell, and there's Big Brother is always watching. You have speakers in your cell, and I have a sense of humor, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna die if I don't have a Coke, like from the Coke machine. The cop came on and was like, what did you say, Gonzalez? You gonna die? Guess what? Roll it up, you're going to the psych ward. And I was like, what? So they came in, they physically extracted me from my cell. This was a Friday or Thursday. It was a 3-day psychiatric hold. It was not a 3-day psychiatric hold. It ended up being 2 weeks because of the nature of my charges, right? And so while I was there, okay, so let me just back up a little bit. I wrote to my daughter one time and I colored something on it with crayons, and that was deemed contraband. So that probably warranted one of those strip searches, right? So now they send me to the psych ward. I'm in a padded green gown. It's just crazy. I'm handcuffed to the shower, handcuffed to the phone, handcuffed to the table, but guess what? There's crayons there. And I was like, what the hell? So just, they started, changing my understanding of like, even in there, like what's criminalized and what's not, right? Sorry, I just lost my train of thought, but just going back to the correspondence, I think even in this work, right, like with Project Rebound, correspondence is so important to me. I obsess over it. It gives me anxiety if we don't respond to somebody. We have a whole MSW intern that like oversees that component of the work, but because I know how important correspondence was to me when I was inside, like in this work, correspondence is like so important to me because that's our direct line of communication and artery to folks inside and how we stay connected. During that same time, when I was in my green dress, I had a visit. It was Mother's Day weekend. So then my daughter comes to see me, and she's like, Mom, why are you wearing that green dress? And I had to be quick on my feet, and I was like, it's my Mother's Day gown. And she's like, they give you dresses for Mother's Day? It's like, what was I gonna tell her, right? But also, during visiting, how so many of us can't bring what's happening in there, right, when we're with our family members. And when I first came home, I didn't know that there was people out here that were fighting for my freedom while I was in there. I thought people didn't care. And no, there's been people that were organizing out here for me to come home. Eventually I came home because of AB 109. So when I came home, I didn't know what to do or where to start. And I eventually made my way over to Homeboy Industries. You may have heard of the organization. And I actually ended up becoming the first homegirl that graduated with the bachelor's degree. And because of that, I think also, the power of storytelling. When I was working at Homeboy Industries, I was a trainee doing maintenance, washing the windows, scrubbing the toilets, and eventually I moved over to work at the Homegirl Cafe. And my shift was 4 a.m. to 11 a.m. And as a single mom, that just did not work. My kid was like a soccer player. Like my kid's amazing. So she was like in all these activities, and having that schedule was just not supportive for that. And I was in Pathways to College, a workshop at Homeboy Industries, and I applied to Cal State Northridge, not knowing what that meant, not knowing when I was gonna get accepted or what was gonna come. And I didn't know, like, you apply now and you don't start till like a year later. I thought, So during this time, I'm at the cafe. I have this 4 a.m. to 11 a.m. shift, and Brittany, who runs the program, she's like, have you heard about, like, from Cal State Northridge, have you gotten accepted yet? And I was like, man, I come home every day and I check my mailbox and they haven't sent me a letter. And she's like, girl, check your email. And so I checked my email and there was my acceptance letter, right? And I still didn't know what that meant. And it wasn't until I was in the cafe chopping chilies and I read a story of Danny Murillo, who many in the space may know, and he's previously incarcerated himself. And there was an article on him on how he was formerly incarcerated, spent 7 years in solitary confinement, 13 years in Pelican Bay, and how he was graduating. And I was like, wow, it didn't matter what Brittany told me. What mattered was me seeing someone living that and doing that, and that's what really motivated me to say, fuck these chilies. And I went to Cal State Northridge, and now I still go to Homeboy Industries. We've established Project Rebound Mondays, which happens every first Monday of the month, and we really just want to have a direct artery to folks in the community so that they too can know that anything is possible.
So let me tell you a little bit about me. Can you hear me okay? I'm basically going to talk about a lot of the trauma that women go through, young ladies go through growing up, and why some of them turn to what they turn to. Basically, I was robbed of my childhood. At the age of 7, I was molested by the husband of my aunt. I will not claim him as a relative, it's just the husband of my aunt. He tortured me by threatening me daily. If I were to say anything, he's gonna hurt me. At 7 years old, living with that kind of threat, it's scary. It was scary to go to sleep at night. It was scary every time he walked in the house. I shouldn't have been going through that. By the age of 11, I lost my mother. She committed suicide. I'm the oldest of 5 children. The twins were only 9 months old. She was only 30 years old when she passed. So going through that trauma of losing my mom, the trauma of what I was already going through when I was younger, I started using drugs. I started using drugs before her funeral. I started on weed. Within the next week, I was on PCP. I started using PCP. That wasn't helping the trauma. I started using acid, and then sometimes both, acid and PCP. So I was basically a lost little young girl trying to go through her puberty as my body's changing, my mind is changing. It's when I needed my mother the most. Having to help raise the twins, the babies, and trying to take care of myself. But the drugs end up taking me into the streets, and I started becoming into the gang, getting involved with gangs, and getting in trouble. Started getting arrested at age 12. Doing the things you need to do to get the drugs you need, do the things you do as you are in gangs. I also experienced a lot of things that I will not say up here when I was in the gangs, things that I shouldn't be experiencing at 12, 13 years old. By the age of 15, I met my husband. He was boyfriend until I was 18. That's when I decided to stop using drugs because he basically gave me an ultimatum. I need to stop using drugs. So I did. I had my first child at 21. But in that time, my husband was an alcoholic, and I didn't realize that I was getting verbally abused, and I didn't know that was an abuse. He didn't hit me until I was pregnant with my daughter at the age of 23. He started hitting me, and you know how embarrassing that is. You're pregnant with black eyes. You know, I hid from the family and covered it up. Oh, he doesn't hit me. He doesn't hurt me, and I didn't realize how bad that domestic violence can be on a woman. Even when he put me in the hospital, he beat me so bad, he bruised my intestines. I had welts on my head. Go to the hospital, I said I got jumped by 5 girls. That's how bad I looked. And I'm apologizing to him. I'm sorry for making you mad. I didn't know. I was young. I didn't understand. Nobody taught me, or nobody showed me that you don't need to put up with that. So fast forward, I wasn't on drugs. I was doing good. I still thought that was the highlight of my life because I became a mother. I was able to raise my children, PTA mom, doing the best I could, enjoyed my children, and been the best mom that I thought I could be. And And I'm grateful I did have that chance to do that because my kids are great. I have a boy and a girl. They had never been arrested. They're doing great. No gangs, no drugs, and I'm thankful for that I was able to do that. But by the time I was 32, I was diagnosed with cancer, cervical cancer, and during the treatment, the chemo and all that, I started getting addicted to the pain medication because I'm an addicted person. So that pain medication, when I went into remission, a few years later. I started, looking for the drugs because I was addicted again. So I ended up finding meth, getting involved with meth. That took me out. Meth, by the time I was 36, I was addicted to full-blown meth. I mean, just straight out an addicted person. I left my home of 19 years with my kids and my father to live in the streets, homeless, chasing that drug. Living in the homeless under a riverbed in a tent, sometimes not even a tent. Walking the streets on Christmas, watching other people celebrating Christmas, and I couldn't go home. I didn't have a home to go to. Those things were, traumatizing, I would say. I remember spending my 40th birthday in the streets, homeless, by myself, in the cold, in the middle of the night, and within that week, I ended up getting brutally raped. I was brutally raped and left for dead. I guess the ones who raped me thought that I wasn't going to survive it. And the way I looked, when I got to the hospital, it didn't look like I was going to survive. I was cut open where you could see the eyeball from the outside. And so my husband went to the hospital because I needed to call somebody, and he looked at me and says, "I can't take you home. The kids, I'm not going to let the kids see you." And I understood, you can't. I didn't want my kids to see me that way. So he had no money for a hotel, so he drops me off at the park. So I go to the park. I used to stay in the playground areas. This way I was off the ground. I didn't like sleeping on the ground, so I sleep in the playground areas. That's where I had to sleep, in pain, cold, and still I didn't leave the streets. The meth had me like that. So I started getting more and more arrested. Every time there was something to get arrested, people were tallying on people, so you're getting arrested for the stuff that you're doing out there. So by the time I was 42, I got sent to prison finally. After all those charges of getting arrested all the time, I was getting sent to prison. And when I got to the county, I got arrested April 5th, 2008. By May 8th, I suffered a stroke because I hadn't been sober in 2 years. So when I suffered the stroke, here I am paralyzed left side. I go out to the hospital. When I got back into the county jail, they did not put me in the infirmary. They put me right back in the same cell I was in when I had the stroke. Having to learn how to take care of myself, bathe, anything. I was hard, I couldn't, go to get meds. I'd have to push my wheelchair with one arm. Nobody wants to help you. If anything, you're more of a burden. So I'm praying to get me to prison, get me to prison. 1 month, I had to go to court 18 times in a wheelchair. That was brutal because, like you said, they'd bring you in, the strip search. Well, I couldn't just do everything. Like they put you in a room outside, in fact, 50 women. You're naked, have to take off all your clothes, and they tell you have to bend over, cough, and squat. I tell them I'm paralyzed, I can't do that. Well, you better learn, or they're going to put your legs over the wheelchair, and everybody's going to see. So I had to do that a few times until I learned how to bend over and do it the way they asked you to do it. The humility there, because women don't want to see all that. And embarrassed, you lose your dignity there. You lose a lot. So finally, I get sent to prison, and I start my therapy. I was determined I'm going to walk again. I'm going to walk again. Within 6 months, I started walking with the walker. Within a year, I was I was able to get out of the walker, but I still needed it for, I was walking. I was prayed to God that I was going to walk in, and I did. But during that time that I'm in prison, like she was saying, the correspondence with your children, my daughter ended up becoming homeless because my husband had lost his home. My daughter's trying to find, where I go. I don't know where she's going. She's 17 years old. Then I'm getting letters from her ex-boyfriend saying that she's living out there wildly and she's drinking a lot. So I'm worrying about her. How do I get a hold of her? And my son, I couldn't get a hold of him. So the whole time that I was in prison, I couldn't talk to my kids. I never got one call, nothing, no visits. So it was pretty hard worrying about my children. But within, let's say 8 months, well, September 11th, I remember September 11th, I had a heart attack. Because of the drugs, the damage that it did from meth, it weakened my arteries and they were collapsing. So when I'm going into the hospital, they take me out, my heart kept trying to have a heart attack, so they couldn't stabilize me, but I'm handcuffed to the bed. And I'm praying, I don't want to die like this. I don't want to die by myself. So I asked the officer, can you call my kids, let them know that I'm in the hospital? And he says, even if they did know, they can't visit you. That's when I realized I wasn't a person anymore. He says, you're state property. And when he said you're state property, that's when I found, okay, I'm just a number. That's when I felt it. And my kids got word out that I had passed from somebody who got out and said that I had died because I didn't come back to the prison for 2 weeks. So my kids thought they lost their mother, trying to get a hold of the prison. Finally, they got a hold of somebody and they told them that, no, I did make it. But when I got out, I never had a work history. So I went to a program and I got to figure out something. I'm a 7th grade dropout, no education. So what do I do? What do I do? I'm disabled, now I got the felony. What am I going to do to survive? I didn't want to be homeless again. So that's when I discovered, let's go to school, let's try school because they give you money to pay for rent. So I started school for the wrong reasons, but it was money, and I started liking it. I got that first aid, and once I got that first aid, that was an accomplishment I've never had. I did it. I did something that first aid, so I started challenging myself. By the time I was done with community college, I graduated with the highest honors. And so after that, I said, let me see if I could, challenge myself. I got transferred to Cal State Long Beach, and that's when I also met Danny Murillo, which found out he was from the same town I was brought up in, and I've seen what he was doing, so I said, well, you know what, let me see if I could do this on my campus. I found 2 other formerly incarcerated students. We co-founded Rising Scholars, the first ever formerly incarcerated student organization at Cal State Long Beach, and then from there, that's when we heard about Project Rebound. So I started advocating for Project Rebound, going to the meetings, the chancellor's meetings, trying to see what we could do to get it on our campus because it was a need. And knowing that I was doing something for a great cause for our people. So now we just got Project Rebound accepted to be memberships campus. And so that was a great accomplishment. But now what we do, I just graduated with my master's in social work last year. 2021, high honors, the highest honors, and I got hired on as the program coordinator, and now I'm the assistant director. I go into juvenile halls, and I go in to help the young girls with trauma. That's why I did the MSW, because I feel I'm here to help those who can't help themselves and advocate for those who can't, and to basically motivate those who feel that they can't do it and should be the example that if I could do it, anybody could do it. So that's my story, and thank you guys. I think we're done, right? Huh? I didn't cry. I cried for Priscilla.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I cried, okay? I cried. Those stories are touching. I mean, we all have a story. I have a story as well. I probably cry when I tell it too, but thank you so much for opening up and sharing your stories. I think it's well needed for us to hear. It helps. So let's open up the floor for questions. Anyone have any questions for our speakers?
I'm just going to ask if you can speak to the mic because we're live streaming it and recording it and people can't hear you otherwise. Okay, great. Thanks, man.
I just want to ask, telling your stories, for me, listening to your stories, it makes me quite angry to hear about the injustices that you went through, right? How did you deal with your own anger at the time, or did you just shut it out? This is for all 3 of you, so. In terms of, because honestly, I was getting really mad, when you were telling the stories, I was like, you know what I mean? I was really legitimately getting really angry, but like, how did you deal with it? Because, you know, being in that situation, knowing that you're powerless, you know what I mean? How did you get through? Because most, you know, a lot of people that don't experience this, you know, they just give up, you know, or, you know, just chuck themselves up as like, I can't find the word for it. But like, how did you three deal with, you know, your specific individual situations?
So for me, I fueled all that anger. I'm an abolitionist because I'm like, these systems clearly do not work. So I fuel that anger into trying to be active. And honestly, for me, I'm in therapy. Homeboy Industries has amazing resources, and one of those is therapy, and I go every week.
What I learned to do was to change the way I thought, the thought process. I started that when I was younger because I didn't want to feel, well, I also need a lot of therapy, of course, but I didn't get therapy till later on. But I didn't have anger. What I learned to do was for every negative in your life, find a positive, no matter what it is. If I could find a positive to, my mother committed suicide, I could find a positive for anything, and I would look for it. And that helped me cope with half the shit that I've been through. Also, a lot of the stuff that I put myself through a lot of the stuff as I was older because of the drugs, but I found the positive, and that's what kept me sane.
For me, it was a little bit different. Like you mentioned, you know, you kind of hold that anger, and I was expelling that anger towards the people who, you know, who cared for you the most. You know, in that situation, I had a lot of pent-up aggression, and unfortunately, it come out in different ways, even to my 2-year-old son. And when I started seeing that, that's when, you know, I kind of shift my perspective. I didn't want to do that. You know, he had nothing to do with whatever happened. And like, you know, Quan mentioned earlier, you know, you have to learn how to forgive yourself and forgive the people who put you in certain situations. So that's what I did. You know, I learned how to, I'm sorry, I'm religious. So I learned how to let go and let God type of thing for me. So, yeah.
We got one in the back.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank you so much for, one, being very, very vulnerable, and yet also so very powerful, and showing us how you're able to get from there to where you are now. Personally, for a lot of us, it's not that easy to get up and do what you just did, but every time we do that, we make it so other people can expose their trauma and their journey to the light of day and get to where we're at and further. My parents met in Orange County Juvenile Hall, so I know I was screwed from the beginning. And it's really weird that I experienced everything that you talked about as a kid, and then later, when I got in trouble, you know, my son was screwed without me for 10 years while I was gone. So it's really strange to see the generational ripple, and just to honor the work you're doing, because I know that that ripple stops with you, and good ripples are coming from it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, hi. So my name is Elizabeth. A little bit about myself. I am a student here at Cal State University Bakersfield. I'm also a member of Project Rebound. And I asked this question last night, but I feel that I'll get even more from the ladies. How do you guys feel about, because in this setting, it's comfortable for us to share our stories because it's out in the open, right? So how did you guys navigate the professional or the educational world? Did you guys just go out there and tell everybody who you were? Were you ashamed? Like, how did you guys navigate being who you were with your past in this setting?
I feel like I've got a lot of, when I started opening up, like you're talking about education or professional?
Yeah, just like how do you, like when you meet people, like, or do you let it be known?
Well, I'm not shy about talking about my story because, you know, that helps me heal. It all depends the environment you're around at the time, when to bring it up and when not to. But if my story could help somebody, and I do. I know certain people that have, my daughter's going through this, or my daughter, I'm having trouble, I don't know what to do with her. Then I'll tell and give them advice. Then I'll open up. This is what I went through, or this is what she's going. I think, because that's how my story was. So I feel if I could help, I'll bring it out. And I don't have nobody really, being stigmatized or being told, oh my God, you did that, or oh my God, this. And I wasn't being judged. And so far for me, myself, I haven't had no problems with it.
I read your story, that's
Huh?
It does help.
Yes, thank you.
For me, when I was on campus, I started organizing on campus because we didn't have Project Rebound, right? So I kind of had to put myself out there, and I wondered what that was going to be like, right? And when I did, and I started sharing just little by little with whoever I felt comfortable, and then their reaction was generally supportive. I did have one that was not, and I looked around and I was like, there's a camera here, otherwise I'd body slam you. That was one. And then also, because I started my organizing on campus for Revolutionary Scholars, our student org, which was the precursor, right? It was like a while ago, so now I'm in this a grown-up job role. And so during that process, someone that I was working with on the campus was like, hey, so what'd you go to prison for? And I was like, and this is someone that's like high level, right? And so I was like, oh, interesting. HR didn't even ask me that. And that was it. That was how I navigated that. And if it would have been like different and maybe like we would have just talked and shared story, like that would have been different. But I think the approach was like, so what did you, and that's never cool to ask someone, Yeah.
For me, I was straight up imposter syndrome. I felt like I didn't belong. I didn't want to say anything, nor did I say anything, right? I kind of just went under the radar. I'm a very social person, so I kind of just mingled in and blended in with the regular students. But you still had that in the back of your head, right? Like you can see it right here, felon, convicted, whatever it is. But that wasn't the case. And it wasn't until I actually ended up in Project Rebound where, Sarah was kind of telling me, coaching me how to own your narrative. And it wasn't until her giving me that perspective and the executive director at the time, Dr. Reese, kind of putting me out there, like, okay, let's try it in this small setting first, about you talking about your story, you explaining it. And, the more you say it, the more you get comfortable. The more you're like, okay, this is who I am. It's not going to prevent me from going or reaching the goals that I have in mind. So it was just going through that process, right? Obviously, there's going to be barriers, whatever it is that you do, whether it is you're going to housing, you want to pursue your education, you want to get a job on campus, there's going to be barriers everywhere you go, but it's how you go about those barriers, right? And being in that program helped me understand how to overcome those barriers. So I was really, really thankful for being involved with Project Rebound.
I'll just add that you'll realize that more of us are impacted by incarceration and sharing your story than not, because in sharing, then other people share like how they're impacted too.
I think we have a question right here, Adrian.
So, just talking about, I think it was Priscilla and Lily, kind of talked about this subject of just degradation in the prison system. And I know from being incarcerated myself that as you spend time in prison, it's pushed on you to be a second-class citizen, So you say you accepted it because I'm going to be here for life, and it sounds like you never did. So I want, it's a two-part question. The first question is, how did you fight against accepting being a second-class citizen, knowing it was passing by the minutes, okay? And the second part of this is, how did you finally rebound once you got out? Did it affect you when you got out?
So for me, I never felt as a second-class citizen being inside. And I don't know if that had to do with the amount of time that I had to deal with, but I never felt that. I knew, in your heart, you know that you're not what they say you are. And that's how I took it. I'm not, apparently I'm a violent person, according to the state of California, but according to me, I'm a really nice person, It's just one person made a mistake and I got caught. We all make mistakes. But I never felt that, so I kind of just didn't even bother entertaining the idea of it. But when I got out, that was a whole different story, because then all those barriers come. The barriers with employment. I got my first job through Craigslist. I didn't even want to apply, through anywhere else. And I was really fortunate enough that they didn't even do a background check. They were like, hey, you have a social? And I was like, yeah, I do. And they're like, okay, cool, you're hired. Great. So, but I knew that that wasn't always going to be the case. And as I moved forward and I tried to get housing on my own for me and my son, the same barrier came up. And it affected me more on the outside than it did on the inside. And again, it was going through those resources and being able to learn the resources and being able to advocate for yourself and speak up for yourself that kind of led me to that moment, right? Where like, okay, I need to be able to fight for myself, because out here they're treating me more of a second-class citizen than I did inside. So that's when I kind of started speaking up and, kind of talking, okay, who do I go to? Who do I need to talk to? Obviously it's not you, let me talk to somebody else, type of thing.
Yeah, and for me, it was more that it was like a procedural thing. Like, this is part of the process when I'm in here. If I'm gonna leave the facility, I'm gonna get strip searched. So to me, it was just very part of it became routine to me. And I also became very detached, and just from my environment and from just everything, right? And I guess like how I rebounded from that, even now, like I'm still kind of like just emotionally detached sometimes. With my daughter, it's like she'll cry and I'm like, okay, how can I help you? Like, I can't handle this. You need to tell me what it is that you need. And I know that that's not always the best approach, right? But I work on it. And sometimes just being desensitized from going through that. And I think that that's what happened to me, because that's what I had to do to myself and my brain to make what I was experiencing like okay. And even now when people ask me to talk about solitary confinement, like I'll breeze through my solitary confinement experience because I can't remember. And I think that that was the way of my body responding to that, It's like I can't remember. Yeah.
Sorry, I think I'm next, but I can go right to you next. Sorry, my name's Autumn. I just wanted to say thank you, ladies, for getting up there and being so vulnerable. I know that's not easy, and I really do appreciate that and respect it very much. I wanted to know, what has been your biggest motivating factor since doing this work, since exiting the system, or even before that, prior to?
I would say helping those who are trying to find their way. Going into right now I'm going into juvenile halls, helping those girls. Those girls have a lot of trauma. That's why I take the MSW to do that. We go into the prisons and just showing them it's not too late. A lot of them think it's too late for them. Oh, I dropped out. I just tell my story, I'm a 7th grade dropout. Graduated at 55 with the master's. It's not too late. And I tell them, I'll show you the path that I took. All the resources I took, because I utilize all my resources. Campuses have a lot of resources for me. And that's what we do. When we go to like Homeboy Industries, we go to ARC, Anti-Racism Coalition, we go spread the word. We will help you get to, you don't have to be at our campus to help you. You want to do a GED, we'll help you get there. We start you from wherever you're at. And that, I feel, is what empowers me to go out there and do more.
So my motivating factor, when I first came home, I was really depressed. I was just sad girl all the time. And a lot of it, I do have a lot of survivor's guilt. I escaped. Escaped that system. I came home. So what would get me up in the morning would be like engaging in this work. I know how difficult it was for me, especially like I went to an organization called Homeboy Industries. I'm not a boy. So I think it was like, for me, you know, advocating for, now that I was no longer a trainee, I could advocate in a different way at Homeboy Industries for programming for certain things that I couldn't when I was a trainee. But also, I think, you know, for me, my motivating factor, I have my children in my life. You know, my daughter, I'm gonna brag about her again. She's at Cal State Northridge. She's getting her degree in biotechnology and chemistry, and she wants to use science to bring people home from prison. And, you know, that to me is beautiful because I didn't have to fight with her on the importance of that, like her mindset, right? So yeah, she's definitely my motivator.
For me, my motivator was my son. So wholeheartedly, obviously, you know, the way things happened when he came into this world wasn't the most ideal, but I mean, I want him to see, because he knows I've been incarcerated. We had this conversation because he's like, oh yeah, all bad people go to prison. I'm like, excuse me, sir? No, okay, let me have a conversation with you real quick. And I explained that to him. I was like, you know, people make mistakes. I was like, and unfortunately, even good people make mistakes. And I want him to know and see that even though I have been incarcerated, I'm still making moves. I'm still moving forward. I'm still, you know, pursuing whatever degree I want to pursue next, that situation never stopped me from thriving, you know? And I want him to see that you don't have to be in a situation in order for you to thrive. You can thrive on your own. Like, if I can do it with everything that I had, you know, you can do it with nothing that you have, type of thing. So that's kind of my mindset.
Thank you, ladies, again, and I'll pass it on.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Manny. So first of all, I want to thank you very much for telling your story because it really was very empowering to me. My mom was 9 months pregnant with me when she crossed the border to come into this country, and she was released the day before I was born. So very empowering. Thank you very much. It really helped me out. So what I wanted to ask is, we know that there's a lot of disparities, a lot of inequity, you know, across a variety of different spectrums when it comes to education and work and equal pay, right? So one of the things that I don't think I've seen is whether or not there's any studies been done regarding formerly incarcerated women and unequal pay. So do you happen to know if there's any data around that? And if not, how can we like raise that or something similar to that as a topic of concern to get some advocacy for policy changes?
Yeah, so actually that report that I mentioned earlier from the Prison Policy Initiative, out of prison and out of work, talks about that unequal pay within formerly incarcerated women and what that looks like. So yes, it definitely does exist, and I don't have any recommendations on how to fix that. It's beyond my scope.
Well, as far as like in my position that I'm in, right? It's not that there's no, you know, equal pay or I guess the amount that you want to earn is not there. It's just there's all these barriers in place, right? And specifically, and I'm talking about my experience being within the CSU system, there's all these barriers that they have for you to be able to get any type of raise, and that's because the CSU staff is underpaid. And they're saying, you know, even though they're underpaid, we can't have you above whatever it is that you're making, because not everybody else within your same classification is making the same. So it's unfair to them. Then that's my personal situation that I've been going through for the past couple months, that I'm just like, well, their money doesn't come from like my funding. Like, that sucks for them. Like, maybe you should raise their pay. I was make it equal pay, hello. I was like, but I mean, that's my perspective, right? What I've been experiencing lately as far as having that equal pay. It's just bureaucracy within the CSU.
Going through the same thing she is. So, yeah, how are you gonna make more than the person who's been there longer than you?
Yeah.
That's what I hear. I said, well, because our funding has more money than the funding you're getting it from. That's all I could think of. Yeah, we have to go, you know, I guess you have to be there another year to, that's by their rules.
We have time for a few more questions, if there are a few more.
I personally, first and foremost, want to thank you guys and Dr. Burrows. This has been so heartfelt and spiritually and emotionally moving, as well as intellectually stimulating. I mean, and even with Kwan's initial step to the line thing, it was just, there's been so much substance here these few hours that I've came today. I wish I would have came earlier. With that said, ladies, I mean, the spirit, the universe, God, I don't know which higher power is, but obviously it's transformed you and allowed you to be some formidable women. And my hat's off to you for that, and I'm super, super proud of you. And I wanted to share one thing with you, and one of the, and I'm going to ask it in the form of a question. It's like affirmations. There's affirmations that I've done with my own healing process, with looking in the mirror and forgiving myself and telling myself I love myself. And I wonder if each and every one of you would share some of the affirmations, or if you use affirmations in some of your self-healing.
There is one affirmation that I use constantly, and my son uses it now because of how much I say it, and it's get it together. Like, if I'm struggling with something, I'm like, come on, get it together, Priscilla. You can do this, because I just need to refocus and realign that energy, right? And my son says it. Like, if I'm struggling with something, he's like, come on, get it together, Mom. And I was like, dang, I'm trying my best, relax. But that's one of the daily affirmations that just so happens to come out, you know, just fluidly, because I say it so often. You know, there's other affirmations too that I've said personally, right, to myself, but that one's the main one that, yeah, hands down, I use all the time.
Mine's not really, well, it can be an affirmation. Mine is more like, God woke you up today.
Yep.
Do your best that you can for today. You know, you're going to get through whatever's going to hand you today. You've been through it enough. You're going to get, if you got through all that, you know, you're going to get through whatever else is coming to you. And that's how I get through my day.
I'm not sure if you've watched the show Insecure. Issa Rae, she has like these monologues to herself in the mirror, and she like pumps herself up, and she's like, you got this, hell yeah, and she does all this. So that's kind of what that looks like for me, because I have to hype myself. You know, I am my own biggest, worst enemy. I get in my head, I have imposter syndrome, I have high anxiety, social anxiety, all the things. So just to even be here, right, like, I had to hype myself up and have like so many inner monologues with myself, because, you know, we do have some of that imposter syndrome. And even like with my data, like I have so many sets of notes, because I was like, what if somebody asks me, where'd you get that number? Where'd you get that data? I can be like, I got it right here, you know? Yeah, so I'm constantly having to have, you know, those self-talks, because, you know, my head, I live in there a lot.
Final question?
First of all, I just want to say thank you so much, ladies. Your stories do help, just like Irene said. My name is Phoenix. I'm part of California Justice Leaders, and I've met a lot of you guys, and I love Project Rebound. I love ARC, and I just want to know, are there going to be any more of the heads of these organizations coming to speak like this?
Yes.
Yes.
So stay tuned on that. Yeah, we definitely will be collaborating more, I'm sure, too. And, oh, yes. So actually, does Project Rebound have a specific mailing list?
No, we don't have a mailing list. But we do have an email, and you can always reach us on our email. I am responsible to responding to that at the moment, so the workers that I have are great. They help me out, so if you guys need to, if you all, need to reach out to us, please feel free to go to our email. It's projectrebound@csub.edu.
Thank you. And the KEG links too, you can find our website here. So we do obviously do some work with Project Rebound and events like this. So we have a mailing list you can sign up for on the website, and we'd be happy to alerts you to what we're doing. So I want to say, just thanks again to Priscilla and Irene and Lily, just on multiple levels. I mean, such an amazing way to close the day. And I'll just repeat what other people said. I mean, just the courage, the knowledge, the insight you're bringing is remarkable. And I think, Project Rebound seems like it's in really good hands. Like, we at least know they choose leaders well, right? Because all of you are here, and Tiffany as well. So thanks so much. And thanks everybody for being here today. When you spend a lot of time organizing events like this with other people, it doesn't work if people don't come and don't like ask great questions and be involved. And all of you did that the entire day. It's just amazing, like really, really wonderful. So thanks so much. I hope everybody gets home safely, and feel free to hang out and mingle and talk for a while. But that's all for now. Thank you.